Matthew Johnson had always believed that love was about trust and understanding. At 34 years old, he had lived through enough relationships to know that jealousy and control could poison even the strongest bond. When he met Chloe Winters, a vibrant and free-spirited 20-year-old, he was immediately drawn to her energy and her openness. Despite their 14-year age difference, they quickly developed a connection that felt unshakable. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and a commitment to honesty. They prided themselves on their ability to talk about anything. No topic was too sensitive, no feeling too difficult to share. Matthew was proud of the trust they had cultivated, and he felt lucky to have found someone who valued openness as much as he did. But lately, things had started to change. Chloe had always been social, but over the past few months, Matthew noticed she was spending more and more time with other men. She would casually mention their names in conversation: James, Daniel, Kyle, and sometimes she wouldn't come home until the next morning. At first, Matthew tried to brush it off. Chloe had always been clear about her need for independence, and he didn't want to be the kind of man who dictated her social life. Still, a nagging unease began to grow in the back of his mind. He trusted Chloe, but he couldn't help wondering why she felt the need to spend so much time with other men. Was she unhappy in their relationship? Was he not enough for her? The thought of her being intimate with someone else made his chest tighten, but he tried to push the feelings aside. He didn't want to let his insecurities ruin what they had. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Matthew decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "Chloe," he said carefully, "can we talk about something?" She looked up from her phone, her blue eyes curious. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Matthew hesitated, unsure of how to phrase his feelings without sounding accusatory. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with other guys lately. And I guess I just want to understand. Is there something missing in our relationship? Am I doing something wrong?" Chloe's expression softened, and she set her phone down. "Matt, it's not about you," she said gently. "I love what we have. I like meeting new people. I like the excitement of getting to know someone, the thrill of something new. It doesn't mean I care about you any less." Her words were like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, Matthew felt relieved that Chloe wasn't questioning their relationship. On the other hand, the thought of her seeking thrills with other men made his stomach churn. "I trust you," he said slowly, "but it's hard for me to reconcile my feelings. I want you to be happy and free, but I also can't pretend that it doesn't hurt to think about you being with someone else." Chloe reached for his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "I don't want to hurt you," she said earnestly. "Maybe we can find a balance. I'll try to be more mindful of your feelings, and you can tell me if something crosses a line." Matthew nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what balance would look like. He wanted to believe that they could make it work, but a part of him wondered if he was simply delaying the inevitable. For a while, their agreement seemed to work. Chloe continued to see other men, but she made an effort to be more transparent about her plans. She would text Matthew updates, letting him know when she was out with friends and when she planned to be home. She reassured him that these encounters were casual, that they didn't diminish her love for him. But despite her reassurances, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time Chloe mentioned another man, it felt like a small crack forming in the foundation of their relationship. He began to question everything: her late nights, her vague explanations, her insistence that it was just fun. One evening, as Matthew was scrolling through his emails, a message popped up from an old friend, Sarah. Sarah had known Matthew for years and had always been someone he could talk to about anything. They hadn't spoken in a while, but the timing of her message felt serendipitous. "Hey Matt, it's been ages. How are you? Let's catch up soon." Matthew replied immediately, grateful for the distraction. They agreed to meet for coffee the next day, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of excitement that wasn't clouded by anxiety. When he arrived at the cafe, Sarah greeted him with a warm hug. She looked the same as always, confident, grounded, and full of good advice. As they sat down and caught up on each other's lives, Matthew found himself pouring out his frustrations about Chloe. "I just don't know if I can keep doing this," he admitted, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "I love her, but it's exhausting trying to pretend that I'm okay with everything." Sarah listened patiently, her expression thoughtful. "Matt, it sounds like you're sacrificing your own needs to keep Chloe happy," she said. Relationships are supposed to be about compromise, not one person constantly bending for the other. Have you thought about what you really want? Matthew sighed. I want her. But I also want to feel like I'm enough for her. I just don't know if that's possible. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel secure. Maybe it's time to figure out if Chloe is that person. Unbeknownst to Matthew, Chloe was grappling with her own doubts. She cared deeply for him and valued their relationship, but she couldn't deny that she felt stifled by the idea of long-term commitment. At 20, she was still discovering who she was and what she wanted out of life. The thought of settling down scared her, even though she loved Matthew in her own way. One evening, as she sat with her friend Lily, Chloe confessed her fears. I feel like I'm living two lives, she admitted. I love Matt, but I also love the freedom of meeting new people. I don't know if I can give that up. Lily raised an eyebrow. Have you told him how you feel? I've tried, Chloe said. But he's so understanding, it makes me feel guilty. He keeps saying he trusts me, but I can see how much this hurts him. I don't want to break his heart, but I also don't want to lose myself. Lily nodded thoughtfully. Maybe it's time to figure out what you really want. You can't keep dragging him along while you try to make up your mind. It's not fair to either of you. Chloe knew Lily was right, but the thought of losing Matthew was unbearable. He had been her rock, her safe place. Letting him go would mean stepping into the unknown, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. The tension between Matthew and Chloe reached a boiling point one night when she came home later than usual. Matthew had been waiting for her, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When she finally walked through the door, he couldn't hold back his frustration. Do you even care how this makes me feel? He asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Chloe froze, caught off guard by the intensity in his tone. Matt, we talked about this. I told you I need space. And I told you I need to feel like I matter to you, he shot back. Do you even want to be with me, Chloe? Or am I just a safety net for when you get bored? Her silence was deafening. In the days that followed, Matthew and Chloe took some time apart to reflect on their relationship. Matthew realized that he had been holding on to a version of Chloe that no longer existed, while Chloe admitted to herself that she wasn't ready to commit in the way Matthew needed. When they finally sat down to talk, their conversation was bittersweet. I think we both know this isn't working, Matthew said quietly. Chloe nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Matt. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, he said. But sometimes love isn't enough. They parted ways that night, both heartbroken but knowing they had made the right decision. For Matthew, it was a chance to find someone who valued the same things he did. For Chloe, it was an opportunity to discover who she was without the weight of someone else's expectations. And though their love had ended, they both carried the lessons they had learned into the next chapter of their lives. The days following their breakup were harder than either of them had anticipated. For Matthew, the emptiness in his apartment was a constant reminder of what he had lost. Chloe's laughter, her presence, and even the subtle hum of her music, it was all gone. He wandered from room to room, feeling like a ghost in his own life. The breakup had been amicable, but that didn't make it any less painful. Chloe, on the other hand, was overwhelmed by the sudden freedom she had once craved. She spent her days flitting between social outings, dinners with friends, and endless conversations with the new people she met. But at night, when she was alone in her tiny studio apartment, the silence crept in. The thrill of her independence couldn't mask the ache she felt for Matthew's steadiness, for the way he had always made her feel safe. Both of them tried to move on in their own ways. Matthew threw himself into work, accepting every project his boss handed him and staying late at the office just to avoid going home. He reconnected with Sarah, meeting her for coffee on weekends, and while she was a comforting presence, he couldn't bring himself to feel anything more than friendship for her. Chloe, meanwhile, dove headfirst into the dating world. She went on dates with men who were charming, adventurous, and free-spirited, but none of them made her feel the way Matthew had. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she had taken his love for granted. One afternoon, as Matthew was walking through the park on his lunch break, he spotted Chloe sitting on a bench. She was staring at her phone, her expression distant, and for a moment, he debated turning around and leaving. But something in him, whether it was curiosity or the lingering remnants of love, urged him to approach. "Chloe," he said softly. She looked up, startled, and when she saw him, her face broke into a small, bittersweet smile. "Matt." "Hi." "Hi," he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "How have you been?" She hesitated, clearly unsure how to answer. "I've been okay," she said finally. "And you?" "Same," Matthew replied. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Chloe looked down at her hands. "I've missed you," she admitted. "I know I don't have the right to say that, but it's true." Matthew's chest tightened. He had longed to hear those words, but now that she had said them, they felt hollow. "I've missed you too," he said honestly. "But that doesn't change what happened." "I know," Chloe said, her voice breaking. I didn't realize how much I needed you until you were gone." Matthew took a deep breath, his emotions swirling. "Chloe, I'll always care about you. But I think we both know that what we had wasn't sustainable. You wanted freedom, and I wanted stability. Maybe it's time we accept that we couldn't give each other what we needed." Chloe nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You're right," she said. "But that doesn't make it any easier." They parted ways once again, this time with a sense of closure. It wasn't the ending Matthew had hoped for, but it was the one they needed. Months passed, and both Matthew and Chloe began to rebuild their lives. For Matthew, the healing process was slow but steady. He started attending therapy, where he learned to unpack the emotions he had buried over the years. His therapist helped him see that his need for stability wasn't a flaw, but rather a reflection of his desire to create a life rooted in love and trust. He also started exploring his interests outside of work. He joined a local book club, signed up for cooking classes, and even began volunteering at an animal shelter. These activities helped him rediscover the parts of himself that had been overshadowed by his relationship. One evening, at a charity event hosted by the shelter, Matthew struck up a conversation with a woman named Rachel. She was warm, funny, and refreshingly down-to-earth. They talked about everything from their favorite books to their shared love of hiking, and by the end of the night, Matthew found himself smiling in a way he hadn't in months. Chloe, meanwhile, had undergone her own transformation. After her conversation with Matthew in the park, she realized that she needed to take a step back from dating and focus on herself. She began journaling, meditating, and reflecting on the choices she had made. For the first time, she confronted the fear of commitment that had driven her to seek freedom at the expense of her relationship. One evening, while scrolling through old photos, Chloe came across a picture of her and Matthew from their first trip together. They were sitting on a beach, their faces lit up with laughter, and she felt a pang of nostalgia. But instead of wallowing in regret, she decided to use that memory as a reminder of what she wanted in the future. Not just excitement, but a partnership built on mutual respect and love. 2 years later, fate brought Matthew and Chloe back together in an unexpected way. Matthew was at a bookstore, browsing through the latest bestsellers, when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Matt." He turned around to see Chloe standing there, holding a book in her hands. She looked different, more mature, more confident, but her smile was the same. "Chloe," he said, surprised. "Wow, it's been a while." "It has," she said, her tone warm but calm. "How have you been?" "I've been good," Matthew replied. "Really good. And you?" "I've been good too," Chloe said. "A lot's changed, but I think it's for the better." They spent the next few minutes catching up, talking about their lives and the paths they had taken. Matthew told her about Rachel, and Chloe shared that she had recently started a new job in event planning. Their conversation was easy, like two old friends reconnecting. As they parted ways, Chloe reached out and touched his arm. "I'm glad you're happy, Matt," she said sincerely. "You deserve it." "You too, Chloe," he said. "Take care of yourself." As Matthew walked away, he felt a sense of peace. Seeing Chloe again had reminded him of how far he had come and how much he had grown. He didn't need closure anymore, he had already found it. And as he headed home to Rachel, he felt grateful for the journey that had brought him to where he was. Chloe watched him go, a small smile on her lips. She knew they had both made mistakes, but those mistakes had led them to the people they were meant to become. And for that, she was thankful. The past was behind them, and the future was theirs to create, separately, but stronger than ever.